This morning, President Biden scrambling to prevent a full-blown bank panic as fears of a contagion effect grow. The president forced to take emergency measures after two of the biggest financial failures in U.S. history. Silicon Valley Bank, the first to collapse, followed by the implosion of Signature Bank. Both catered to the tech startup world. The president trying to reassure Americans that their deposits are safe while making sure to blame Republicans.
Thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements.
President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Should all depositors be protected at all banks?
And the president getting praise from his former press secretary, Jen Psaki, for getting up early to give a speech before the stock market opened.
It's important to note President Biden does nothing at 9 a.m. He is a night owl. So the fact that he is doing this at 9 a.m. anyway speaks to how vital the White House recognizes it is for him to have his voice out there, conveying that to the American public.
And the bank's facing criticism for being more focused on the green agenda rather than the bottom line.
The administration has pushed many of these banks into more concern about global warming than they do about shareholder return. And these banks are badly run because everybody is focused on diversity and all of the woke issues and not concentrating on one thing they should, which is shareholder returns.
All right, Harold Ford Jr. got us kicked off in the green room explaining things from your point of view, and you understand this pretty much better than anybody I've talked to today. So let me give you the floor.
I need to get you some more people to talk to. So.
Go ahead. What do you think of all of this and what the president's done today?
So this is a bad situation. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves with two banks having to be closed. And the federal government the Fed having to come in. I think the president, what I took away from him was really two or three things. One, that every deposit that all of us have, be it small, big depositors, big, medium-sized businesses, small businesses, everyone's deposit is going to be protected and insured for 1 year at least. Number two, it sounds like tonight the Fed is going to try to figure out even more and more what happened at the Silicon Valley Bank. And it sounds like they're even trying to sell the bank again. I think even some of the criticism we heard in the opening from some, which I think some of that is legitimate. Many wish that there had been a private market solution to this and that the federal government would not have had to come in, the Fed would not have had to come in to help. But I would contend to those that say that when we got to Sunday night and there had not been a deal, that it was, I think, appropriate for the Fed, and I hope in a bipartisan way Congress and the Senate can agree with this. This was the best solution to a really, really bad challenge or bad problem. It would have been a terrible thing had we had a continued bank run today in a serious way, and if the market had responded negatively. Three, there's a lot of political appropriating blame to go around. I wish people wouldn't do that right now. I wish that anything that has been passed over the last several years to try to address this issue, because some may know around the table, we stress test banks that are more than $250 billion in size. This bank was $200 billion in size. We passed rules several years ago to help reduce some of the rules again, that banks like this have to face smaller banks, because the smaller banks said it's too expensive for us to try to comply with all of this. We clearly now need to relook at that and see if that's the right way to do it, if there's a better balance of protections for depositors and, more importantly, a better protection for taxpayers. I think in the intermediate and long term, we've got to think about what does this mean for banks if everybody's deposits are insured, even the insured and the uninsured.
Yeah.
And all that really means is if you have over $250,000 in the bank as an individual or business, are we prepared as a nation to say all of that's going to be protected? Should there be some protections for small business and medium-sized businesses who run their business operations, payments and other things, including how they pay their employees through these banks? I think we should have that conversation. But I think right now, at this moment, I think the government has done what the government should have done. It was the least expensive way to try to help address this problem. And I hope going forward that everybody that's voted in the past for things they thought were right, look now and see if indeed the things they passed are what's best for our system.
One thing you said right before we got here was a really good point, is that thinking back to 2008, is that the phone was not really what we used to do our banking.
So
I
people were
remember
able-
in 08, when I left the White House, I didn't even have a Twitter
The run
account.
on the bank was done as much by people going right into their accounts on
It's
their
interesting.
smartphones, and you couldn't
and how
do that.
quickly it happened. Because as you were pointing out, this bank was solvent as of Wednesday, and then all unraveled. But Jesse, as much as our esteemed friend, who we love to see at the table, would like to see politics not play a role, it plays a role. It is. It's a part of the system that we have, and we're going to see politics.
Well, first of all, it's good to be back around the table.
Yeah.
And I'm glad the Night Owl didn't take any questions on one of the biggest bank collapses in U.S. history. I would have liked him to answer a question, but, maybe Ducey didn't yell loud enough. Tell me where I'm going wrong here. You have a president who spent more money than any other president in the entire world and just showered this industry with cash. I'm talking Silicon Valley. I'm talking these San Francisco people. More money went out the door to these people than ever for solar, for everything. This is a big solar financing bank. And all of a sudden, we have record inflation. And these guys are sitting on piles and piles of money. And they didn't see that the Fed was going to have to raise rates. So they made a bet that the rates were going to not go up. Oops, the rates go up, and now all of a sudden they're blown up. And they say, guys, we're going to need all of that money back because there's going to be a financial crisis. Well, how do we know? They're always saying, well, there's going to be a run on the banks if you don't bail us out. There's going to be a run. We got to get the money. The donors and the bankers always get the money, don't they? They always squeeze the money out of the politicians. Because they scare them. We're not going to have any more donations left if we don't get some of that money back. So this company, it is a woke bank, despite what you said in the green room. They're very into this social justice investing stuff. They're all concerned with gender and everything. And even as the bank's collapsing, they're still holding seminars on gender ideology. And they're getting bonuses on the Friday that they blow up. And the CEO is selling, what, $6.5 million in stock 2 weeks before? Like, he had no idea this was going to happen. The San Francisco Fed chair had no idea. Isn't it the San Francisco Fed chairs that have some sort of visibility on this stupid bank?
The examiners
They're just going to blow this up.
First.
And what
I
this,
agree with you.
Okay, you agree. Good.
I agree with you.
And what this does, I thought you were only supposed to insure up to $250,000 in deposits. Now you can lose $250 million, and Uncle Sam's going to come out and shovel money at you. What does that do to everybody? They could just throw money around. There's just no safety. This is a safety net for the bankers. This is a social safety net for bankers. And everybody else, like, he wouldn't even pay for hotel rooms for the people of East Palestine. And all of a sudden, he's just like, here, take some money. There's going to be a bank run. Goodbye.
I don't agree. I agree with everything you've said. The
Thank you.
only thing I disagree with, we should protect depositors, and that's what I think is the right thing to do.
One thing interesting that came out of this, Kennedy, was that you have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders saying, but the banks will pass the fees, they'll make up the cost of having to do all of this by passing on those fees to customers. It's like, why don't they think that that is also true when they want to raise taxes on everybody?
Yeah, and by the way, a lot of the regulations that Elizabeth Warren has been pushing for 15 years, the banks are complying with that by passing on more fees in different ways. But, I look at this, yes, it is absolutely political, but it's also, a big part of the blame here, in addition to the people running and mismanaging that bank, and shame on them, it's the Fed. And this administration has been so incredibly irresponsible with inflation. So what has happened is they have had to raise rates so quickly that part of the economy was bound to break. And here was the weakest part of the banking sector, because these two banks were so concentrated in crypto and venture capitalism, and they weren't diversified. They had some treasury notes, but when the bond market collapsed, the banks were sure to follow suit, because on paper they looked good, but actually their debt exceeded the equity that they had by quite a bit. So the Fed now either has to continue raising rates to stave off inflation, which is getting worse, or, they go back and inflation sets the economy on fire, because there will be no end in sight for how high that can go. Money's going to be more expensive. People are going to lose their homes, and unemployment is sure to follow, unfortunately.
Okay, Brian, what you got?
Well, first off, congratulations to Harold. I thought Jesse was yelling at you. You didn't take it that way, so you're a bigger man. For a while, I thought there was going to be a duel, but it wasn't that way.
No duel.
A couple of things. Do you notice the first thing you hear from President Biden is It's Trump's fault. The first thing you saw with the balloon, well, the balloons passed during Trump administration. The first thing with the railroad, well, Donald Trump said don't put brakes on railroad trains. Remember?
Also,
it was his fault.
Also, when it rained, it was Trump's fault.
It was Trump's fault. So I'm like, what a bad, it's everything you don't want your kid to do is blame somebody else, not take responsibility. The other thing is, I also thought it's really important that this guy, Greg Becker, takes a Silicon Valley Bank chief, sells $3.6 million worth of company stock a couple of days before. He knows we're going to be talking about this. He knows it's going to be news, but it's worth it because he's eventually going to get a pass. People get their bonuses. We all get screwed. Also, right across the street, I didn't know there was a Republic Bank right there. So I don't know if it's because it's raining but right now it has dropped 67% in value.
Is there a line?
If there was a run of the banks, there's no line. So I think that's good, but that could be next.
I got my money out of
They're
Nichols
using their
Brown.
phone.
Right. Oh, yeah, I should have comprehension.
Run to the
Not
phone.
good for me.
But
That's where we
Harold-
started it. It's on the phone.
Harold, I know we have to go, guys, but just one quick question. What about this guy selling the stock 2 weeks beforehand?
Look, I'm learning like you're learning. There's going to be an investigation of this, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. They can claw it back. If he did that knowing that this was going to happen, then he'll face some consequences. I think it's also important to note the big banking system in our country is as capitalized and as protected as it has ever been. So the big banking centers are the ones that are
Is there a worry it's going
stress
to
tested.
consolidate to those 4 big banks if all the regionals evaporate?
A lot of those big banks can't buy little
can't?
banks anymore. It's against the
And
rules.
also remember during COVID, it was the little banks who were able to get the PPP loans out. Remember that one in Mississippi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.